Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds, where you can find quality content for the game Last Epoch. We work hard here at Epic Builds and would appreciate a comment and a like, as that's the best way to tell YouTube we are doing a good job. All of these builds are homegrown, no save file editing, no deception, no underperforming setups, just epic builds. Cue the video. Alright, in today's video topic, we're going to go over my Bleed Hail of Arrows Marksman. So we're building around the unique quiver called Sanguine Horde, and of course the unique pair of gloves, Salt the Wound. So the idea is we're utilizing Sanguine Horde to turn our bleed percentage global chance into bleed damage over time, or our hail of arrows. So for instance, every second they have a chance to apply a bleed, and if we have like 600% chance to apply a bleed, it'll apply like 6 bleeds per second. Now, this is the first time that this has ever been viable. So for instance, hail of arrows has ailment stuff in its tree, but since you could not apply your percentage chance to your stuff, it normally just would not work. But thankfully, thanks to this unique quiver, this archetype has finally been realized. So we obviously use the Sanguine Horde. We pretty much hail of arrows every so often, and we deal a lot of bleed damage. Now, this version that I'm running we're running with Puncture and Shift. So Shift gives us 50% increased bleed effect and 50% increased bleed duration the next time we shift. The next time we attack after a shift, which is usually Hail of Arrows. That will apply to the entire duration of Hail of Arrows, making up for the fact that we're paying so much mana for it, right? And only doing it every so often. So the bleeds have a 50% increased duration applied from HoA and effect. This will stack up on top of the duration that we have from Valdier's Chalice to 100%, and the bleed effect we have from Salt the Wounds, which I don't know how much we're getting yet, but it's a significant amount. And this combines to make your bleeds into a very nasty source of damage, as unlike other sources of damage over time, like for instance cold HoA, if a mob runs through your HoA AoE and runs out, they'll stop taking damage. But since you're applying bleeds to them with a very long duration, if they walk through your HoA and walk towards you, they will die to the bleeds instead, because they still have them applied to you. It's not like as if walking out of the AoE will stop the bleeds, it will just stop applying bleeds, which makes it feel a lot better for Monoliths, a lot smoother for Monoliths. We don't have to do a 20 button combo to do damage with cold HoA. Obviously, cold HoA is an amazing build. I'm not shit talking it, but for Monolith farming, there's probably a better way, which is this build. Now for Arena, you probably really want to be going cold HoA because this could not keep up in Arena, in my opinion. But for Monolith, it works completely fine. And since we're utilizing Puncture to stack global bleed stacks, global bleed chance, it allows us to focus our gear more towards percentage increased damage and crit multi to actually scale our Salt the Wound bleed effect, which is amazing because Marksman usually doesn't have access to bleed. It usually does bleed effect mainly. The only bleed effect it has, specifically for this build, is inside shift. And 50%, I'm going to be honest, is not enough to build or rebuild around, so having Salt the Wounds gives us a lot more to build around. Now, other things this build does, since we're using a Valdier's Chalice for the bleed duration, and we're using the Sanguine Horde, we have about 4% of damage over time, 4% of Fizz damage over time leeches life. It means literally we can face tank the world, because since our HoA is applied on enemies and it's a duration and it stays down, and of course how ailments and leech work, we pretty much, that's all of our sustain. We could take damage, we could take a big chunk of damage, but we'd instantly go back up thanks to this combo. Also as well, while clearing Monoliths, once you kill bleeding enemies, you'll actually gain 20 health per bleed that was on that enemy, which since we're playing with HoA, that's a lot of bleeds. Now, other things this build requires, I would heavily suggest getting HoA duration idols, as the longer your HoA duration is, the longer your bleed duration is, the more single target damage you'll have, which is kind of where I think this might lack. But so far, from the Oribus kills I've done and the Shaman kills I've done, the single targets seem fine. Obviously, this is a level 90, but if you did not know, this is just my new style of doing videos where I showcase the level 90 gameplay and then the level 100 gameplay later when I have really good gear. So this gear is actually very scuffed. I don't have capped resistances. I'm barely pushing into Salt the Wound scaling. And the only thing I have that's good right now is I believe my bow and my uniques, obviously, right? You do require the Sanguine Horde to start the build, and to push the build past probably Empowered Monoliths, you will probably need Salt the Wound. So this is more of a, this is what you can do if you have the uniques, than a, you should play this. If you want to play an HoA build that doesn't require any uniques to get started, I would heavily suggest trying Cold HoA, which is on the channel. With that being said, let's get into the game, shall we? All right, here we are in game with the build here. So we're going to go over a hail of arrows. So we take 4 points into volley so that we have an increased area. 1 point into Sky Strike because it takes our global bleed chance and applies it again. And so you can just think of it as an extra second of bleed chance. Then of course we're going to be taking 3 points into condemn so that we immobilize trash mobs and slow big mobs like scarabs, so that, you know, they're not always constantly on top of us. It's just extra quality of life while clearing monoliths. And we take 1 point, we're going to be taking 5 points into focus for more damage, 5 points into pristine flesher for even more damage, and the area is fine. That's plenty of area, right? Then 4 points into steady for increased duration. Now, you must be wondering, why am I not running nowhere to hide? Because this does not affect damaging ailments. So this actually does not work for your bleeds. That's why my hail of arrows is level 17 instead of 22, because I realized in the middle of recording that this does not apply to your ailments. So good thing I caught that. So don't grab this node. It doesn't work for your bleeds. Just put 5 points into focus and then extra points in condemn. If you do not have a +2 chest for hail of arrows, I would just run 1 point into condemn. Now for puncture here, this is your stereotypical stacking puncture setup. So the most important part is this. We take 4 points in the bloodthirst, so we get 3 stacks of bleed chance, which give us 60% per, right? And then we can get 3 extra stacks, so we get about 360% global bleed chance from puncture alone. Now, the duration is 3 seconds, but it gets refreshed if we attack again. So for instance, I attack here, right? And if I attack again, it gets refreshed, meaning that it's actually very easy to maintain this buff in boss fights. As we're, you know, doing a bunch of HoAs, obviously you want the Fizz Shred, and then, you know, the Frenzy, and then the extra mana. But other than that, nothing really else with puncture. Smoke Bomb, stereotypical setup. The only thing different is we're getting Crimson Shrouds for extra bleed chance. This isn't that relevant because I actually don't end up using Smoke Bomb often except for the Moonlight Bomb for the Silver Shroud stack. So this is like whatever you want to deal with this tree. Then for Shift, this is different. So we take 4 points into Velocity for increased damage with our next HoA, 5 points into Head Trauma for 75% increased damage with our next HoA. Then of course 3 points into Bazooka's Hesitation for even more increased damage with our next HoA, right? So for instance, if I shift, I will deal a lot more damage with it. And since the way it's set up is by the time we regen the mana, we will be able to just shift and attack again, right? It's very strong. And of course, we take 5 points of Hypovomia. I tested this. This does work with HoA. This will apply the bleeds per second thanks to the Sanguine Horde, of course. So that actually does work, which is nice to know. Then, of course, 2 points into Jagged Cuts for bleed effect and duration. These are rare stats for Rogue because you don't normally get that much bleed effect or duration, which we are stacking even more of that with Valdyr's Chalice and with Salt the Wound, right? Now, for the rest of the tree, it doesn't really matter because you only have 1 point, so I just put in the movement speed. Decoy, stereotypical decoy tree, nothing to really talk about it. It's literally what you do for decoy with every other build. There's not really much of a difference. Rogue kind of has that issue where like there's utility skills are kind of found out, and there's not really much you can do different with them. So that's pretty much it for the skills. For the passive so far, I'm taking 8 points in Swift Assassin. So we're not running attack speed on the prefix on our bow, but we do want some attack speed for Puncture so that whenever we want to weave in a Puncture attack, for, of course, the Bleeding Fury stack, it doesn't take forever. So you can just weave it in. We take 1 point travel into Guile, 5 points into Evasion for damage taken while moving, 2 points into Dodge and Parry for extra glancing blow. Eventually, this is going to be maxed out, and this is going to be maxed out. And of course, we take 4 points into Sapping Strikes for increased mana gained on Puncture use so that we're always topped off on mana and we never run out. Then for Blade Dancer, we're only grabbing 8 points in Cloak of Shadows, and then 1 point into Shroud of Dusk. Probably going to max this out, probably remove points in Pursuit and max this out. And then, of course, we're going to use Apostasy, as that will give us Glancing Blow capped once I get everything set up later on in the next video. And then for Marksman here, we obviously take the 8 points in Draining Arrows for even more increased bow attack speed, 1 point travel into Focus Fire, 1 point travel into Assassin's Quiver, then 1 point travel into Concentration, 4 points into Prolonged Demise as travel. It gives us increased damage, which is fine. Then 1 point travel into Woundmaker, 4 points into Mediation. We're going to need Flat Dodge to reach the Glancing Blow cap with Apostasy, so this is some of our Flat Dodge. Then 5 points into Heightened Senses for crit avoidance. This will save us on affixes later on and suffixes. The bow critical strike multiplier does not apply for Salt the Wounds. Like I said, that's global critical strike multiplier added. It does not affect specific kinds, like bow critical strike multiplier, melee critical strike multiplier. Does not affect that. Then we take 10 points into Barbed Arrows for increased damage and chance to inflict bleed on bow hit. From what I've seen, this chance to inflict bleed on bow hit will apply to the damage over time with the Sanguine Horde. I believe. If someone thinks otherwise, please tell me. But from what I've seen so far, it seems like as though that's how it functions. Now, 10 points into Ethereal Arrows. We have a 60 mana cost Hail of Arrows, so we actually get 300% increased damage from this node. And it obviously gives us increased mana and mana regen, which are really nice quality of life. Then 2 points into Master Archer for increased area, right? And then 1 point travel into Barrage of Pain, then 5 points into Perfect Aim. That's actually one of the cool things with this build, is we actually gain crit multi as we attack, which you can tell we're actually getting bleed effect as we're attacking with our Puncture, because we are gaining crit multi from the Barrage of Pain stacks, which is then being converted into into bleed effect, which then affects our bleed. So it's actually just a lot of extra damage, which is really cool. Like I said, for the rest of the nodes, I'll be grabbing the Dodge and Parried, and of course Thief Guard for HP. Probably going to finish out grabbing, or is it Shroud of Dusk, then of course Apostasy, and then do whatever I need to do in terms of Flat Dodge to reach Glancing Blow cap, so we can be extra super tanky. Obviously take 1 point into Aerostorm, then 1 point into Covering Fire for extra Silver Shroud stacks as well, and because these don't get overridden by Glancing Blow stacks. I mean, not by Apostasy. Because Apostasy makes it so you can't dodge, but Silver Shroud will still let you dodge, right? That's very nice. And that's pretty much it for the passives. For the gearing, it's all shit. Most important parts, +2 to HoA for convenience. This is the kind of bow you want. I'm not sure what you want on the other suffix, but you definitely want the fizz / damage over time. You want the crit multi. You want the bleed chance, as this will all apply. You can either run a northern bow for bleed chance, or you can run an obsidian bow. I like running an obsidian bow myself because the base attack rate is 1.1, which makes your puncture attacks really fast. And then, of course, we have the Sanguine Horde. This is mandatory. This is the only reason the build functions properly. It takes 125% of her bleed on hit and applies it per second with Hail of Arrows. Very strong. Gives us Leech. Gives us minus mana cost because we don't want more than 60, as that would fuck up with our mana regen math. And of course, increase attack speed for even more attack speed. Very, very strong. And I could see this quiver being used in different builds and not just this build, because it has attack speed, minus mana cost. Like, there's a lot of reasons you'd use this quiver outside of this build specifically. And of course, Salt the Wounds. This is the second mandatory item. That's not necessarily mandatory, but if you're going to push high Monolith and all that, you definitely want this, as it gives you a lot of damage. So for instance, I can show you. We're at 565, 338. That is giving us, I believe, 60% more damage. Yes, 60%. Is it? Oh, no, it's not 60%. That's so weird. Yeah, it's so weird how that works. But yeah, it's giving us like 200, more like 150. So that's about 50% more damage-ish. It'll be much more later, obviously, when I get more crit multi. But yeah, these gloves are absolutely insane because Rogue doesn't normally get bleed effect other than like shift and all that. So the bleed effect we get is just all multiplicative, which is insane. And of course, Valdir's Chalice. This is more of a kind of like if you have it, you might as well run it. But if you don't have it, you could just run a crit multi relic with like the bleed chance because you want as much crit multi as possible. But that 49% bleed duration, which goes up to 50%, is very strong because on top of the shift bleed duration, this will make our bleeds last 6 seconds instead of 3, which of course is very strong for a single target. And that's it for like the mandatory gear. This will be in the description in a build planner. For idols, like I said, we want fizz damage over time / increased duration idols. Those are your best in slot. You want as many of those as possible. You don't need to do anything else. Those are the most important ones. Just duration, then fizz damage over time. And that's it for, obviously idols. And that's pretty much it for this video. The next video will be out probably a day or 2 from now, depending on how long it takes for me to get to empowered monos and to tune this up for Endgame. Thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you're at, and bye!